young, from about the age of 12. I first heard Don McLean's song Vincent on an episode of The Simpsons, and that kind of just set me off in terms of like falling in love with music. I didn't think I'd get into it at that point. That kind of came like a few months later when my uncle brought a guitar around, and he also loved, you know, the Beatles, Neil Young, Jimi Hendrix, and all those people as well.
Yeah, well, those are some amazing influences, and especially as somebody who's into old school music, kind of like that, above any other genre, you know, I completely understand where you're coming from. And of course, Don McLean himself will be on this podcast for the second time in a couple of days.
Oh, really? Oh, brilliant.
I'm excited for that. So when was it that you got a guitar? How old were you?
I was 12. I was 12 when I got my. I used to love. I just love football, to be honest, and that's all I wanted to do. And then, yeah, my uncle just after football training, he had a guitar there waiting for me. He didn't think I was going to learn it or anything, but yeah, from the age of 12.
And how quickly would you say that you're a natural guitarist? Like, did you kind of take to it like very naturally? And how did you learn? Were you playing along to records, or did you get lessons or look stuff up, or was it a mixture?
Yeah, it was a mixture of everything, really. I mean, I never had any lessons, but when I grew up in a time with YouTube and things like that. So if there's anything we ever wanted to, I can't imagine what it must have been like all those years ago if you wanted to learn a new chord, and unless you bought a book or something, I suppose. But yeah, so it was a mixture of listening to records, playing along, and yeah, a bit of YouTube as well, which helped a lot. But in terms of natural, I think a guitar is quite unnatural instrument. It's because it's funny sometimes when I play things on a piano. I'm not a piano player by any means. I'm not good at all, but some things do come more natural and easier on it than a guitar, let's say.
Yeah, because with a piano, would you say it's kind of easier to kind of put it together with theory and to get all of your understanding of all the notes and chord structure and scales? Is that all easier on a piano, or is that just a misconception?
Well, I couldn't really tell you because I'm not a very progressive piano player by any means. But and also my theory is zero. I don't know much about music theory, but certainly in terms of, I guess, like when you're on a piano, like to play a note or to play a scale, the jumps don't seem as big as they would on a guitar, because you know the note that's next to on a piano might be 3 or 4 strings or frets away on a guitar possibly. So it all depends.
Yeah, well, it's always really interesting because the type of music that you make and your influences are like some of my favorite. And I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast, like, you know, they're either trying to make their own music or they're, you know, interested in learning music. And it's a bit of a daunting prospect now, because obviously, as you say, with YouTube, you can learn anything. And of course you can see anything. And some people know so much about music theory and have the most like ridiculous kind of musician chops. And that's amazing. But there's also, you know, the Beatles couldn't read music and they made great songs and they did just fine. How advanced had you got when you started kind of writing your own songs, making your own music in terms of the technical aspect? Did you focus on that, or did you just do what you found enjoyable and gave you pleasure?
No, of course. No, I like to, it's important for it to be enjoyable. You know, for me, I felt like I never say that I ever practiced, because whenever I picked up a guitar, it wasn't a practice. It was just something I enjoyed doing. Never felt like a chore. But yeah, I guess at the time, technically, I always like to try and challenge myself technically, because that opens new doors to songwriting when you learn a new lick or, you know, a new structure or something like that. So, but at the time, I guess I was just kind of letting it flow a little more naturally, and that's something that I try and do in the beginning process of writing a song, is just let it come naturally, and then when it comes down to finishing and putting it together, that's when we have to start getting a bit more technical and making critical decisions.
When did you start writing your own songs?
I was 14. Because I kind of noticed at the time, my cousin was in a band and things like that, and they used to do gigs, and he told me, because I was like, how do you get a gig? And he was like, just got around half an hour's worth of material. So I started trying to get enough songs to make up that half an hour. And yes, from age of about 14, 15, I probably had about 8 or 9 songs probably.
Wow. And how quickly was that process, and is it a similar process now when you write?
Yeah, I guess now I think because I've been doing it for a while, it comes a little more instinctively, I suppose. Like when I'm in the studio, I seem to be able to make the correct decisions a little bit faster. Not always. It's always hard to get it right all the time. But now, yeah, I certainly feel like I work a bit faster, and I'm just more disciplined. I think I was a bit lazier when I was a bit younger, whereas now I like to really I like to have a song by the end of every day. I try and write.
Yeah. So do you write every day, or do you kind of just save things up?
Yeah, a bit of both, really. I mean, it used to be just loads of parts, as I say, but now I'm like, right, this is good. I've got to make it a song, and if it's not working, I'll move on. So, but yeah, I like to try and write every day. It's what I love to do, and it's it's my favorite thing, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've had some great success and great results. So, it seems like
Getting a bit tired of it now, though. I want to be out gigging now.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine it is. I think a lot of people would like to go to a gig of yours, and a lot of people want to go to gigs in general. It's getting to the stage where we want to do things in person more and more. So when initially when you were kind of building up that half-hour repertoire to go out gigging, like where do you remember when your first gig was? Was it like a pub gig or?
Well, yeah, the first I played a few local pubs. There was a pub called the Loggerheads, which is closed now in Nottingham, which was pretty cool. Where it actually had a cave underneath, where sometimes you play, nobody would be there, but it was still fun to just jam out. And there was a place called the Maze, which supported me when I was very young, gave me gigs. But my first ever show in front of an audience would have been the most horrifying one, and that was the school concert when I was about 14, 15, and yeah, standing up and playing in front of your friends. And I made a mistake to begin with. That's kind of always stuck with me. Like, I don't think there'll be ever a harder gig as that for me. I don't think so. Whenever I get a bit nervous or daunted by an audience, I just think back to that.
But why was that so hard? Just because it was in front of like your classmates and your year, and people like you take the piss more easily?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're the people that you're going to be seeing every day for the next, 2 or 3 years. And so there's no escaping it. To be honest, though, I didn't receive any, any negativity from it, actually. It was surprisingly, because I think I played Vincent by Don McLean. And I think it was just that old of a song. Nobody really knew what to make of it. They'd never heard it. So it went down okay, actually.
Yeah. And so from there, obviously your first record, your self-titled record that came out in 2012 was a huge, album and breakthrough and all the rest of it. And, everybody will have different tunes that they love from it. But I think Broken is just such a great song, how did things progress from that early stage to making that album?
Well, it kind of, again, that was kind of, I always kind of see that record as more of a collection of songs as opposed to, right, we're making a record, because there were songs on there I'd written since I was 15, like Someone Told Me, and up to where I was 18 with like Lightning Bolt and Trouble Town and things like that. And so it kind of, some of the songs were recorded in my manager's studio. At the time, he wasn't my manager. He was just somebody helping me out with recording. We did a few songs and recordings there. And then as I got a record deal through that process, about 17, then obviously they suggest trying to write with other people and things like that. And I kind of saw it as a free education, I guess. So I started working with Ian Archer, Crispin Hunt, and people like that. And it kind of came together quite naturally, and I learned a lot in the process, I thought.
Yeah. And were you kind of taken aback or surprised by the huge success of the album, or were you very ambitious and kind of planning for it to be that big?
Yeah, I've always been very, very ambitious. Not ever really a confident person, but my ambition kind of takes over that for me, luckily. So, but at the time I was 18, and I'll be honest with you, at 18 you don't really care about much. So I think I was probably, more of a nonchalant attitude about it. And the lucky thing was, after it'd been to number one, I went out to tour in America with Noel Gallagher and Snow Patrol the week after. So, and that was for a month. So in a way, it was good for me. I got away from, any publicity or anything like that at the time, and just starting all over again in another continent.
And do you think, because, well, Noel Gallagher, particularly Oasis, those type of artists, like, it feels like this type of music is no longer, in the top 40 as much, and it's no longer kind of part of the youth culture in many ways. Do you think it might return to being so? And do you care about that, or do you just want to make the music that you want to make?
To be honest, yeah, it would be nice to see some more bands coming up. It would be nice. I just haven't heard a proper rock band for a while. I'm sure there's probably some out there, but for me, I haven't heard, and it'd be nice for it. But at the same time, I don't want to have something back for the sake of having it back. For me, as long as the songs are good, that's all I really care about. It could be, it could be a dance record, it could be anything. If the songs are great, then that for me as a writer, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. And there's still obviously amazing music being made in all sorts of genres, but it is weird because almost throughout every decade, and especially, in the 90s, you had that kind of Beatlesy style coming back a lot with Oasis, and their popularity obviously continued like for 20 years or whatever. It's only like the last 5-10 years where you've really seen it kind of go down a bit. So, maybe it will return.
Ever since Jav came along, gone right down.
So, I'd say you're one of the few people keeping it going. But Noel. I mean, I guess Liam has done very, very well solo. But I guess, I mean, I wonder whether part of that is because of the Twitter account and all of that, which kind of, I don't know.
Absolutely, but at the end of the day, that's him. He's not pretending to be anybody else. That's him. Right. That's conveyed in his messages on Twitter. It's conveyed in his music, and I think people have just bought into who he is. I don't think it's very far from a facade, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's kind of good to see at least some stuff like that. Do you have a preference as to one of the brothers' solo stuff? Do you listen to both of them, or do you find yourself going back to Oasis stuff more?
I think Liam's new song's really good actually, and it's nice to hear that he's still putting stuff out and it's still going high in the charts. And yeah, I have to say Liam's new song was really nice, and yeah, I hope he keeps putting them out, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. Would you be pleased if they got back together? Do you think it will happen?
I don't know. I mean, it would be nice to have another record, but I think it'd have to have kind of some edge to it. I don't think it could continue in the same vein as the records towards their end of being together. So I don't know. I mean, it'd be great to go to an Oasis gig, wouldn't it? I never got to see one. I bet it's pretty cool, to be honest. So yeah, that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, if you see the sort of like the final gigs just before they broke up and stuff, almost seems like another time, because I don't know, like Liam seems quite drunk in some of the footage, and it really does feel quite rock and roll, the whole sort of thing. It feels very unfiltered, like the management haven't managed to calm them down. So
absolutely, but that's something that we're lacking in this in this day and age with the music. I feel like, especially in a time, people aren't allowed to make mistakes, then like that kind of, any kind of resilience against the establishment, there seems to be consequences in the industry now. So it's we're seeing less and less than that, and it's sad, to be honest. It's like I feel like a lot of people can't really let themselves go and like be themselves in a way. It's a little bit sad, but it also means that the singer isn't always drunk when you're trying to watch a gig. So there is that side.
Yeah, there are pros and cons. Do you think if there had been like camera phones and social media, you'd have seen less of that in the 70s? Because by all accounts, like people like, I don't know, like Eric Clapton was like very drunk on stage in the 70s. I'm sure the Stones, like I'm sure
Like the Rolling Stones, like I think that, yeah, I think a lot of bands back then would most definitely be cancelled today, as they say. So yeah, there is that element to it, but yeah, it's kind of, but that's just the way of the world, I suppose. So,
yeah.
I'm not really, I've not got any complaints about it. It's just yeah, just not. It'd be nice to see a bit of edge back, especially in rock and roll.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's lacking sometimes in rock and roll compared to other genres. So, I mean, moving away from that though, I wanted to ask about like your voice has. You've got a very unique kind of like vocal tone, and that came across like right from the word go on the first album. Is that something that you were conscious of and tried to develop, or did someone say, your voice is unique, it sounds great and really special, or did did you have to kind of train and work at it, or is it just just how you sing?
Well, I guess when you're starting out, you always hear that thing, you've got to find your voice, and it's quite an infuriating thing to hear at the beginning. So you're like, how on earth do I do that? And to be honest, I just used to sing in my bedroom to all sorts of records. I used to sing to Johnny Cash and and the Beatles and things like that when I was younger. And I guess it developed into more of a natural voice. It's I don't know why. Some people say it's got kind of an American accent about it, but I just like to. I think it's because I like to pronunciate when I sing, because if I sung in a Nottingham accent, I don't think no one would have any idea what on earth I was on about. So yeah, I like to pronunciate when I sing, and yeah, it's just something that I kind of let develop on its own. And as obviously we've done many more gigs and been in the studio more and more, it's gotten stronger, I think, and yeah. It's okay. It's quite naturally, as I've been told.
I thought, I mean, particularly on like the first tune that I really sort of thought, wow, this is like something totally different and something that I haven't heard for a while, was Broken, and that whole album. But I thought Shangri-La was a brilliant album as well. So what was it like working with Rick Rubin, and was it like a big change from the first record? Was there quite a lot of pressure? I mean, it doesn't seem like you can have felt that much pressure because you put it out like the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was no pressure really in making that record. If anything, I was actually I was meant to go and re-record Broken with Rick Rubin for a single. So there was supposed to be another version of it, and that was the objective of that trip. And so we went and did that, and then he just asked if I had any more songs, and I had a few bits of stuff and a couple of songs, and I played it to him, and he goes, let's make an album. And that was I think the label were a bit fearful, because they were like, didn't think we'd had any songs, and obviously it's going to cost a lot of money and things like that, but it flowed very naturally, and Rick brought in some great musicians to help on the record. Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers, my friend Matt Sweeney, and a guy called Jason Lader. And yeah, it was very organic, a big change from the first record. I mean, you're in Malibu, California, and it's the band's old studio and Bob Dylan's old tour buses in the garden, and there's lemon trees growing everywhere. You can see the ocean. It's a million miles away from the studios I was recording in Nottingham. So yeah, it was a big difference, but an amazing experience, and yeah, something I'll never forget. But at the time, again, because I was only 19, it was getting that nonchalant thing. I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time, and but very grateful for that experience now, for sure.
Did you find it very easy to kind of just be yourself, be creative, not have inhibitions when you were kind of put in that environment with Chad Smith playing drums, and you've got Rick Rubin, who's worked with everybody from Jay-Z to Johnny Cash to I mean, everybody knows who Rick Rubin is pretty much. So
well, I'll be honest with you, at the time I didn't really know, because I was only 19. I didn't really, and I think if that helped me if anything, because I didn't feel that pressure or while I'm working with this person. It was only at the time, and more so after, that I discovered how much he'd actually done. But yeah, that like, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's just at 19, I just listened to artists I didn't really know about, making records or producers or anything like that, really. I couldn't tell you some of my favorite records producers. So
that is, yeah, undoubtedly a good thing in the sense of, would you have been likely to be nervous, you know, or do you find that you're pretty confident no matter the atmosphere? Because it's a big change of atmosphere, and, you know, depending on people's personalities, like some people can be extremely confident and creative and kind of uninhibited around friends or in comfortable environments, but then, you know, thrust into, like, even if it's an amazing place in LA and like you're looking at the ocean, it may just be. But did you? It sounds like you just didn't find it very intimidating at all.
no, I mean, you know, I guess it's kind of, you know, at the time, again, I was a teenager, so you have that attitude a little more. But as I say, not very confident person, but I do love going to new places, new experiences, and meeting new people, and that excites me a lot. And any opportunity to make a record with in a different environment with different people who are great at what they do is always an opportunity I'm willing to jump at.
Yeah, and yeah, of course, and rightly so. And so, somebody who kind of co-wrote 3 of the tunes on that record is Brendan Benson. What was it like working with him? I mean, obviously he's part of the Raconteurs, but I remember, like, he released a solo record in 2005 that I thought was, like, really, really good. He's a very underrated artist in many ways. And how was it working with him? And was he there through Rick Rubin, or?
No, yeah, he was a great guy, first of all, and that was a great trip because that was in between of recording the record. So me and Ian Archer, we took a little trip out to Nashville, where Brendan's based. Well, he was at the time, and we just had a jam, had a few ideas, and me, Ian, and Brendan wrote 2 or 3 songs together, and it was just a fun little jam in Nashville. I don't think I'd been before at the time, so. That was a lot of fun. If I recall, that wasn't that much fun because I couldn't really drink because it was 21. But the writing process was a lot of fun, and it was great. He's a great musician and a great writer, Brendan. And actually, it might be nice to do some more stuff with him in the future, hopefully as well.
Yeah, for sure. They turned out great, those tracks. You know, I feel like, you know, that album and, you know, On My One, Hearts That Strain, but those, you know, to me, like, your work has been very, very consistent in quality. But I've got a couple of questions.
Sometimes.
Well, I you know, but I will say, you know, that obviously the first record was like an absolute, you know, multi-platinum smash, and then you know, the records after have been very successful, but not as successful. Does that annoy you? And are you constantly trying to, like, in your mind, work back to album 1, or do you not think too much about the commercial aspect of things when you're making your music, and just, you know, put out the best music you can, market it the best that you can, and then at that point it's almost out of your hands? Because, like, for example, I thought Hearts That Strain was just as good as album 1. Was it Dan Auerbach who produced it?
On Hearts That Strain, no, Dan just wrote a couple of tracks with me on that album. It was a guy called David Ferguson who produced that record, and he was like Johnny Cash's engineer in Sun Studios and things like that. So, wow. And he was a great producer. But no, I don't ever think I've got to get back to album 1. For me, that it's done, it exists, it's there. I don't need to replicate that. Yeah, I can definitely, you know, have harks back to it in music I release further down the line, but I don't think you'll be able to ever capture anything like that again. It was at a time where I knew so kind of little about music at the time in comparison to now, that there's kind of an innocence about it, and or something more natural. But yeah, it's very difficult to be consistent. I don't think it's very. I can't think of many artists that have been consistent throughout their careers in terms of the quality of music. I think, you know, probably ABBA, Beatles, Bee Gees, maybe like that. But even some of my favorite artists, like Neil Young, there's a couple of records that somebody probably should have told him not to put out, but he's got a lot of great records as well. And so it's very difficult to be consistent, but that's the learning curve, and that's what you take from it. It can only help you evolve as an artist. And and help you create the next thing that's in your mind and your heart.
Yeah, very true. It's to you, what do you feel about your catalogue so far? Do you feel that it's consistent? Would you agree with what I said, or do you feel like that Neil Young thing? Are there some even like individual tracks where you're like, oh, I didn't like that one?
Yeah, my third record could have been much better, I believe. I like the songs. I like the songs from that record, but at the time, I didn't really have an A&R. I didn't have much support for that record at the time, and it was a difficult process. It was tough, and something that I wish that I could. If I could, I'd like to try and improve it, but it exists now, and that's the way it is. Some people love it, and that's great. I always like that idea of there'll be somebody that doesn't like the 3 other records and someone that likes that one. So there's always that perspective. But no, it's very difficult to be consistent, one thing I like to experiment, and I like to try and make every record different, and with this new one that I'm creating, it's kind of like none of the others as well. It's definitely more modern in terms of its production, but I do feel like the songs on this record are probably some of the best songs I've written for a while, and some of my best, but that's not for me to decide. And but I'm looking forward to this new record. I like to think it makes up for the third one a little.
Well, I enjoyed the third one, but so because that was going to be my next question. So because it's been a while since you've released a full album. Obviously, you released some singles last year. Do you think that you'll put out this record this year? And have you been, because some people have like held back things due to the pandemic, has the pandemic put you off, or if anything, has the pandemic got you kind of writing and in the studio more?
Well, I think a lot of artists are probably considering, like with every album becomes a big tour, so that's probably why they've considered moving their albums back. I'm quite lucky at the moment. I'm in a good position where I'm pretty much done with my record, so I've just got the songs ready to go, and I just want to keep putting music out. Really, I don't know why you deprive the audience of that. Even if it's like their song's not going to make it on your record, you should, if you're proud of them and happy with them, then people should hear them. But I most definitely would like my record out this year. I'm 27 this year, so it'd be a nice age to put it out. So yeah, I like it out this year for sure. And
recently there's been a kind of campaign led by Guy Garvey from Elbow and a bunch of people about Spotify and, insufficient remuneration for musicians. Do you resent the way that the industry works in that sense, the way that you really can't make a great living just off the music itself? You've kind of got to tour or do other kind of commercial things to support yourself, or do you accept that as the reality and kind of figure that it's more like, it's like marketing, putting out the music and then you tour to make a living?
No, I do. I think that the way that the finances are distributed amongst artists from streaming music is it's not fair. And a lot of the labels, they're making more money now than ever as well, but it's not very much talked about. But for me, I'm not one to complain too much because I'm quite lucky in terms of, because I write my own songs, I do make a decent living from my publishing and my touring. But I'm more concerned about the artists that don't have those opportunities, how much it affects them, and the more upcoming artists, because it's getting, a lot of the money is getting filtered to the top artists, and it's the more up and coming ones and the smaller artists that need the help more than any time, especially in this crisis we're having. And it's it's disappointing. It'd be nice to see a bit more given back to the artists that work hard to develop their art and don't really see much return for it.
Yeah. Why is it the record labels are now more successful than ever? Is it just because they've got the spread of everybody?
Well, I think it's because they have quite a big percentage in the streaming services now, I believe. So they've got it pretty sewn up, and that's just the way it is. I'd like to think there was an alternative way where artists would get more financial support, but that's the way it is. And
yeah.
if that change in the future, I'd like to see it, yes.
Do you think that there's a possibility that people like Spotify and Apple Music, or I don't know, could kind of at some stage kind of ditch the record labels and sort of do a Netflix?
I think we're beyond that point now. I think we're beyond that point, unfortunately. And at the same time, record labels, it's not all bad. They do offer, for somebody like me, it's having a major label backing is great, because the money they do put into the marketing and things like that certainly helps.
For sure.
And because I've kind of always felt with my music, it's, I think a lot of people feel the same way. If you believe in it, then sometimes it's not enough, and sometimes you just need it to be pushed in people's faces for it to be listened to these days, and that's how everything's going. Everything's just pushed in your face, and you see it all the time with new artists. You can kind of tell when they've got a big major label backing. You're seeing them everywhere, but nobody's really ever heard of them before. So there are some good aspects to it, and but it can also be very brutal industry as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess what you're saying, it's not changed in the sense of, whether it was in the 60s or the 70s or now, like you need connections, you need to get that kind of bigger level of success. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's on Spotify now. You have the label who know the people at Spotify to get you onto the right playlist, in the same way that in the 60s, the Beatles needed like Brian Epstein to get them on the BBC or whatever. It's
exactly, you need people. You need people fighting your corner, and you need people who believe in what you do and pushing you. And I have to say, I've recently signed to RCA Records, and they've been great with me, and they're showing me a lot of support at the moment, and so I can't really complain very much, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah,
I have seen the other side of it as well, where you're not the cool guy at the label anymore. You're not the new kid on the block, and when you don't have that support, you definitely feel it, and I've definitely been on that side of it. And but that's the world, and it happens pretty much every industry, doesn't it? So just have to.
Of course. And show business has always been very fickle, I guess, but it's all worth it for, when you're making your music, and I guess especially when you're playing live. Do you have any gigs in the diary at the moment? Like, are you kind of keeping your fingers crossed for a return at some point, like summer festivals or anything, or are you just kind of praying and hoping that the pandemic dies down as quickly as possible?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping, hopefully the vaccine will get rolled out pretty soon to the people that need it. And ideally, well, not ideally, but it would be nice if we could play around August time, whether that's autumn, whether that's a possibility or not, we don't know. So we're just gonna have to wait and see, unfortunately. I'd like to think it will happen, but I also can't see it. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Have you done live streams and things like that?
Not really. No, I've been doing a few covers at home and things, but I've been writing the score for a film about Ronaldinho, the Brazilian football player. So
I saw that.
That's kept me quite. I've never done anything like that before, so that's kept me quite busy. And
is that a biopic?
I think it's like a documentary film kind of thing. Yeah, it's by two brothers called the Douglas brothers who are directing the film, and one of them, Andrew Douglas, he'd done a few music videos for me in the past, so that was the connection. And they asked if I'd have a go at the music score for it, so it's been pretty fun. I had to learn like a few jamba and samba and jazz a little bit, which is totally not my street. So.
Will it be a documentary about like his career as a footballer, or
Yeah.
What is he collaborating on the score with you? Because the last I heard, he'd become a musician himself.
No, no, I did do that, but no, he's not. No, it's been a challenge, to be honest. But I like a challenge, and I've always wanted to have a go at something a little bit different. And to be honest, if I wasn't doing this, like I've been doing it for about 8-9 months now. If I didn't have this, I'd probably be pretty pretty insane.
Yeah, it's good. It sounds like a real challenge, something completely different, and the documentary will be great because he's such a personality.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice, to watch some of the scenes, and very inspiring guy. And when you see, how much of a nice, super happy person he is, watching those scenes as you're writing is really inspiring.
So this is the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, and thank you very much for joining us. And normally, I would finish by asking you, who do you think the greatest of all time are? But I'm imagining you probably answered that with some of your early influences. So I wanted to ask you a different question to finish things off, which is, or can you think off the top of your head of a tune that you've heard this year? It doesn't need to have been released this year, but what was the last tune on Spotify that you sort of got, or maybe it was on vinyl, who knows? But the last tune that you got obsessed with to the point where you were listening to it like lots of times. The kind of best tune of this year or last year.
One of the song I've just off the top of my head, one tune I've been liking is I think it's called "Can You Get to That" by Funkadelic. A pretty cool tune.
That is a great tune.
Yeah, just grooves, man. And I had a look at the chords. I think it's only like 2 chords, but it sounds like loads because it just grooves and there's loads going on. It's a brilliant track.
Yeah, it shows a lot of musicianship when they can just keep on chords like that and make.
When you can just groove on 2 chords, and keep going and never gets tiring at all. It's definitely a skill.
Yeah, to never feel awkward playing like just the same thing again and again is it's a real skill of musicianship.
I do it all the time.
Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Really appreciate it, and really looking forward to the new music. And have a great day and everything. Thanks so much, Jake.
Cheers, Tom. Nice talking to you, mate. Thank you.
If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.